Ethan Reynolds adjusted his disguise. A simple brown jacket, a baseball cap, and thick-rimmed glasses. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing himself. It was necessary. For the past 5 years he had built Reynolds Deli from the ground up, turning it into a popular chain known for its fresh sandwiches and warm atmosphere. But lately, he'd been hearing rumors, complaints about management, concerns about employee treatment. He could have sent an inspector, but Ethan wanted to see things for himself. He wanted to know how his workers truly felt when they thought the boss wasn't watching. That morning he walked into one of his busiest locations in downtown Chicago, greeted by the smell of fresh bread and sizzling bacon. The lunch rush hadn't started yet, but the staff was already moving with urgency. A young man behind the counter, probably in his early 20s, noticed him first. "Hey, you here for the job opening?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I saw the sign outside." The manager, a burly man named Carl, approached, sizing him up. "You got experience?" "Some," Ethan said vaguely. Carl sighed. "Fine. We need extra hands. Minimum wage, no freebies, no discounts, no slacking. You work hard, you stay. You mess up, you're out. Got it?" Ethan nodded. It was a far cry from the values he had envisioned for his business, but he held back his reaction. As he was handed an apron, he heard a woman's soft laughter from the break room. "Skipping lunch again, Maria?" someone teased. Ethan glanced over. A young woman with tired eyes and a gentle smile simply shrugged. "Not today," she said. Something about her tone made Ethan pause. Why was she skipping lunch? And why did the others sound like it was a regular thing? He was about to find out. Ethan tied his apron and stepped behind the counter, blending in with the other employees. He took a deep breath, ready to immerse himself in the daily grind of his own deli. The place was bustling. Workers were chopping vegetables, assembling sandwiches, and ringing up orders. Carl, the manager, barked orders without much patience. "Move faster, people. Lunch rush is coming." His tone was sharp, almost impatient. Ethan noticed Maria again. She worked swiftly, her hands moving with precision as she wrapped sandwiches and filled orders. She was efficient, polite, and well-liked by her coworkers. But every time someone went on break, she stayed behind, pretending to be too busy to stop. During a quick pause, Ethan turned to the cashier, a young man named Jordan. "Hey, does Maria always skip lunch?" Jordan sighed, glancing toward her. "Yeah, pretty much. Says she's not hungry, but we all know that's not true." Ethan frowned. Why would she lie about that? Jordan hesitated, lowering his voice. "Look, man, I don't want to put her business out there, but she's got it rough, works double shifts when she can. Never complains, but we all kinda know what's up." Ethan processed this information carefully. His company prided itself on fair pay and good work conditions, yet here was one of his employees struggling. Was it a problem with wages, or something deeper? A few minutes later, Carl clapped his hands. "All right, Maria, go take a break." She waved him off. "I'm fine, really." Carl rolled his eyes, but didn't push further. Ethan watched Maria smile at a customer as if nothing was wrong, but something inside him stirred. This wasn't just about skipping lunch. There was a story here, one he needed to uncover. Ethan couldn't shake his curiosity. He watched Maria move through her shift with quiet determination, never missing a beat. But every time break time came, she made an excuse. It wasn't normal. Deciding to dig deeper, Ethan took his own break and sat down at a small table near the back. He grabbed an extra sandwich from the counter and casually called out, "Maria, you sure you don't want to eat? I got an extra one." Maria hesitated, glancing at the sandwich. For a second, Ethan saw something in her eyes, hesitation, maybe even longing. But then she shook her head and smiled. "Thanks, but I'm not hungry." Ethan knew that wasn't true. "Come on, sit for a second. You've been working hard." She sighed, but finally gave in, taking the seat across from him. She didn't take the sandwich, though. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap, her fingers nervously playing with her apron. Ethan leaned forward. "Maria, I've noticed you never eat on your breaks. Is everything okay?" She hesitated again, then let out a small laugh. "You're observant," Ethan shrugged. "Just looking out for a fellow worker." Maria exhaled, her smile fading. "Honestly, I skip lunch to save money." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. "Save money?" She nodded. "Every dollar counts. I have rent, bills, and a little sister I help take care of. Eating at work feels like a luxury I can't afford." Ethan was speechless. His company paid above minimum wage, but was it enough? He'd never thought about the real-life struggles his employees faced. For the first time, Ethan realized that his deli wasn't just a business. It was a lifeline for people like Maria. Ethan sat in stunned silence, Maria's words echoing in his mind. She wasn't eating. Not because she wasn't hungry, but because she couldn't afford to. And yet, she worked tirelessly, always smiling, never complaining. He forced himself to speak. "Maria, I didn't know things were that tough for you." Maria shrugged, offering a small, tired smile. "It's just life. I'm not the only one. A lot of us stretch every dollar to make sure our families are okay." Ethan's stomach tightened. He thought he understood his employees. He had worked his way up from nothing, after all. But hearing Maria's struggle firsthand made it real in a way he had never considered. "Have you told management about this?" he asked carefully. Maria let out a soft laugh. "Told them what? That I can't afford to eat here? What would they do? Honestly, I don't even think about it anymore. I just keep going. It's part of the job, right?" Ethan shook his head. "It shouldn't be." Just then, a voice called from the front. "Hey, new guy, stop slacking." It was the shift manager, Greg, a man Ethan had hired years ago and trusted to run things properly. Ethan turned back to Maria. "Thanks for telling me," he said, giving her a nod before heading back. As he worked, Ethan watched Greg more closely. He noticed how Greg barely interacted with the employees, just barking orders, making sure tasks were done fast, but never checking in on their well-being. Ethan clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about one worker skipping lunch. Something was deeply wrong with how his deli was being run, and he was going to find out exactly what. Ethan kept his head down, pretending to be just another worker, but his mind was racing. Maria's revelation had shaken him. If she was struggling this much, how many others were in the same boat? He needed answers. As the shift went on, he paid close attention to how Greg treated the staff. The man was relentless, demanding faster service, criticizing small mistakes, and never once offering a word of encouragement. Employees looked exhausted, their smiles forced. Even customers seemed to notice, exchanging glances, when Greg snapped at a young cashier for taking too long to bag an order. Ethan decided to probe further. During a lull, he casually asked another worker, James, how long he'd been here. 2 years, James replied, wiping his forehead. "I used to love it, but lately, it's been rough." "How so?" Ethan pressed. James hesitated but then sighed. "Ever since Greg took over as shift manager, things changed. Hours got cut, but work got harder. He schedules us short, so we're always scrambling. And if you complain, he'll make sure you regret it." Ethan's stomach twisted. "And the pay?" Ethan asked. James let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, about that. Greg forgets to log overtime sometimes. Says we should be grateful for the hours we get." Ethan clenched his fists. This was worse than he thought. His own deli, his business, was mistreating employees under his nose. Just then, Maria walked past, rubbing her stomach slightly. It hit Ethan all over again. These were people with real struggles, and the deli was failing them. He had seen enough. Ethan wasn't just going to observe anymore. It was time to act. Ethan could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Every conversation he had that day painted a clearer picture of what was happening in his deli. His employees were being overworked, underpaid, and mistreated. And at the center of it all was Greg. As the shift neared its end, Ethan decided to push further. He approached Maria as she was cleaning the counter. "Hey, Maria," he said, keeping his voice casual. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up, surprised. "Of course. Why don't you just bring lunch from home?" Maria hesitated, then gave a small, embarrassed smile. "I do, sometimes, but I have 2 little ones at home. Whatever food I have goes to them first." Ethan's heart sank. He had expected an excuse about time or inconvenience, not this. Maria wasn't skipping lunch because she wanted to. She was skipping it because she had no choice. "Does Greg know about this?" Ethan asked. Maria sighed. "He doesn't care. He barely lets us take breaks as it is. He says if we're hungry, we can buy something off the menu. But with the way hours have been cut, most of us can't afford to." Ethan swallowed hard. He had built this business with the hope of creating something good, a place where employees felt valued. But under Greg's management, it had become just another corporate machine, squeezing workers for every last ounce of effort. "Has anyone tried to speak up?" Maria gave a bitter laugh. "To who? The owner? We've never even seen him." The words stung. Ethan had been so focused on expanding his business that he had become a ghost to his own employees. That was going to change. Tomorrow, he would reveal who he really was. And Greg was in for a rude awakening. Ethan barely slept that night. Every story he had heard weighed on him. Maria skipping meals to feed her kids, employees being denied breaks, and Greg running the deli like a dictatorship. It was time to take control of his own business again. The next morning, Ethan walked into the deli as usual, still dressed as the humble new hire. Greg was already there, barking orders and complaining about lazy employees. But today was different. Ethan wasn't just observing, he was about to change everything. At noon, when the deli was bustling with customers, Ethan stepped forward. He cleared his throat and called for everyone's attention. "Excuse me, everyone," he said. The employees looked up in surprise, and Greg shot him an annoyed glare. "What the hell are you doing?" Greg hissed. Ethan ignored him and continued. "I have something important to say. My name isn't Evan. My real name is Ethan Walker. I'm not a new hire. I'm the owner of this deli." A wave of shocked gasps rippled through the room. Maria's eyes widened, and some of the cooks exchanged stunned glances. Greg's face turned ghostly pale. "Wait, what?" one of the cashiers whispered. Greg forced a laugh, though he looked nervous. "That's a good joke, kid. Now get back to work before I—" "You'll what?" Ethan cut in, his voice firm. "Fire me? I own this place, Greg, and I've spent the past few days watching how you run things." Greg opened his mouth but quickly shut it. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Ethan turned to the employees. "I've seen how hard you work, and I've seen the way you've been treated. That ends today." The room fell silent. Greg looked like he wanted to disappear. "Starting now," Ethan said, "things are going to change around here." The employees exchanged hopeful glances. Greg, however, looked like he had just received the worst news of his life. Tomorrow, Ethan would make sure justice was served. The room remained silent as Ethan's words sank in. The employees looked at each other, unsure whether to believe him. Greg, on the other hand, was still frozen in place, his jaw clenched as if trying to find a way out of the mess he had created. Ethan took a deep breath and turned to Maria first. "Maria, I heard what you said yesterday about skipping lunch so your kids can eat. No one who works hard should have to make that kind of sacrifice." Maria's eyes welled with tears, and a few employees murmured in agreement. "From now on," Ethan continued, "every employee gets a proper break, and no one has to go hungry." A small cheer broke out among the workers. Even the customers who had overheard started nodding in approval. Ethan then turned his attention to Greg. "And you," he said, his voice sharp, "you've been abusing your power for too long. You've treated these employees like they're disposable, and that's unacceptable." Greg's face darkened. "I was just doing what was necessary to keep this place running," he argued. "No," Ethan shot back. "You were running this place for yourself, not for the people who make it successful." Greg started to speak, but Ethan held up a hand. "You're fired," he said simply. Greg's eyes widened. "You can't." "I can," Ethan interrupted. "And I just did." A wave of relief washed over the employees. Some clapped, others let out sighs of exhaustion and joy. Greg, realizing he had lost, stormed out of the deli without another word. Ethan turned back to his team. This deli was built on hard work, respect, and care for each other. That's what it will be again. Better wages, fair treatment, and a place where people actually want to work. The deli erupted into applause. Maria wiped her tears, smiling for the first time in a long while. As Ethan looked around the room, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His undercover journey had opened his eyes to the struggles of his own employees, and now he had the power to make a real change. This was only the beginning. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share to spread the message of fairness and respect in the workplace. What would you have done if you were in Ethan's shoes? Comment below and let us know. And if you love stories like this, subscribe for more eye-opening and motivational content.